at the same time, it allows me to treat everything like a hobby, really. Like, I do nothing for my dinner, like nowadays. So I can kind of just.
For most of his life, Macaulay Culkin lived under a spotlight that never truly switched off. Millions watched him grow from an innocent child with a mischievous smile into one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Every success became a headline. Every mistake became front-page news. And every rumor seemed to spread faster than the truth itself. But nothing prepared fans for the moment when the man who had survived decades of public scrutiny suddenly stopped pretending everything was fine. There was no dramatic press conference. No emotional interview. No desperate plea for sympathy. Instead, there was something far more unsettling: silence. The kind of silence that only appears when words are no longer enough. For years, Macaulay had managed to outrun almost every storm. He escaped an abusive childhood that left scars invisible to the cameras. He endured relentless tabloid stories predicting his downfall. He watched strangers invent versions of his life that had little connection to reality. Somehow, he always found a way to smile again. Or at least, that's what the world believed. Because behind every public comeback was another private battle that almost nobody saw. Then came a moment that reopened wounds many assumed had healed long ago. It wasn't another Hollywood scandal. It wasn't a career setback. And it wasn't a controversy created by gossip magazines. It was deeply personal. The kind of loss that doesn't simply break your heart, it forces you to relive every painful memory you've spent years trying to leave behind. For the first time in decades, the little boy who once carried an entire family on his shoulders seemed unable to carry his own emotions. And to understand why this moment affected him so deeply, we have to go back to where the story really began: a tiny apartment in New York, where fame first arrived disguised as hope. But before the fame, before the red carpets, and before the world knew his name, Macaulay Culkin was simply a little boy trying to make sense of a life that never felt normal. He was born on August 26, 1980, in New York City, into a family where money was always in short supply and space was even harder to find. The apartment was crowded, the responsibilities came early, and every day seemed to revolve around making it through another week. While most children spent their afternoons playing with friends or discovering new hobbies, Macaulay's routine looked very different. His father, Kit Culkin, had once dreamed of becoming a successful actor himself. But as those dreams slowly faded, they began to take a new shape through his son. It didn't happen overnight. At first, acting auditions seemed harmless, almost exciting. Casting directors immediately noticed the young boy's calm personality, remarkable memory, and natural confidence in front of adults. Opportunities started arriving one after another, and with each role, the family's financial situation improved. But success came with a hidden cost. The more Macaulay earned, the more pressure quietly settled onto his small shoulders. Without ever saying it aloud, everyone began depending on him. A successful audition meant the bills could be paid. A missed opportunity meant another month filled with uncertainty. Before he was old enough to understand responsibility, he had already become responsible for far more than any child should ever carry. To the outside world, he looked like the luckiest kid in America. Behind closed doors, however, childhood was slowly disappearing. And as his talent continued attracting Hollywood's biggest names, no one could have imagined that one Christmas movie would transform his life forever, while quietly setting the stage for years of emotional battles that were still waiting to come. Then everything changed with a single opportunity, one that would turn an ordinary child actor into one of the biggest stars on the planet almost overnight. By the late 1980s, Macaulay Culkin had already appeared in commercials, television shows, and a handful of film roles. Industry professionals admired his remarkable discipline. Directors noticed something unusual about him. Unlike many children his age, he never seemed intimidated by cameras. He remembered his lines effortlessly, stayed focused during long shooting days, and delivered performances with a confidence far beyond his years. That quiet professionalism caught the attention of legendary filmmaker John Hughes while Macaulay was working on Uncle Buck. Hughes immediately realized he had found someone special, a child capable of carrying an entire movie on his own. Months later, that belief became Home Alone. No one expected the film to become a global phenomenon. It was simply another family comedy with a modest budget and a simple holiday story. But when audiences met Kevin McAllister, everything changed. His unforgettable expressions, clever traps, and fearless attitude captured hearts around the world. Within weeks, Macaulay wasn't just a successful young actor anymore. He became the child star. His face appeared on magazine covers, television commercials, billboards, and toys. Fans recognized him everywhere he went. Families replayed his movies every Christmas, turning him into a permanent part of holiday tradition. But behind the laughter, another reality was quietly taking shape. The bigger his success became, the less control he had over his own life. Every blockbuster increased expectations. Every paycheck brought more pressure. Every achievement made it harder for him to simply be a normal teenager. Hollywood celebrated the miracle child. Very few people stopped to ask whether the child was actually happy. And as the money poured in faster than anyone could imagine, the people closest to him began fighting over something far more valuable than fame itself. But while millions of families were laughing at Kevin McAllister's adventures, the boy playing him was living a story that was becoming harder to escape. As Home Alone shattered box office records, Macaulay Culkin's life transformed almost overnight. Every studio wanted him. Every producer believed he was the safest investment in Hollywood. Movie offers arrived one after another, and before he had time to enjoy one success, he was already filming the next. To the public, it looked like a dream. In reality, it felt more like a non-stop race. Projects such as My Girl, Home Alone 2, The Good Son, and Richie Rich kept him constantly in front of the camera. Long filming schedules replaced school activities. Interviews replaced birthdays. Red carpets became more familiar than playgrounds. While other teenagers were discovering who they wanted to become, Macaulay was expected to remain the same smiling child the world had fallen in love with. But fame came with something even heavier than endless work. Money. With every blockbuster, his earnings skyrocketed into the millions. Suddenly, enormous financial decisions surrounded a boy who was still too young to drive a car. The success that should have brought freedom instead created tension inside his own family. Every new contract became another negotiation. Every paycheck raised expectations. And every victory seemed to deepen the divisions behind closed doors. People admired the fortune. Few noticed the emotional price attached to it. Those who worked with Macaulay often described him as polite, professional, and remarkably mature. He rarely complained. He showed up prepared, hit every mark, and carried himself with the discipline of an experienced actor. But even the strongest child has limits. And before long, the pressure inside his own home would become impossible to ignore, leading to a decision so shocking that it would forever change his relationship with the people who were supposed to protect him. Then came the moment that proved Macaulay Culkin's greatest fight wasn't with Hollywood, it was with his own family. By the mid-1990s, Macaulay had earned more money than most actors would see in an entire lifetime. On paper, he had everything a teenager could dream of: fame, fortune, and worldwide admiration. But behind closed doors, the success that made him a household name had also become the source of constant conflict. The people managing his career were the very people whose lives depended on it. As the pressure intensified, so did the tension between his parents. What had once been disagreements over acting roles reportedly evolved into bitter arguments over contracts, money, and control. Instead of enjoying the rewards of his hard work, Macaulay found himself trapped in a battle he never asked to be part of. Eventually, the situation reached a breaking point. At just 15 years old, he made a decision that stunned Hollywood. Rather than choosing one parent over the other, Macaulay asked the court to remove both of them from controlling his finances. It wasn't simply a legal dispute over millions of dollars. It was a desperate attempt to reclaim a life that had never truly belonged to him. Years later, he would speak openly about living in fear of his father, describing a childhood shaped by intimidation, emotional control, and constant pressure. Those words changed how many people viewed the smiling boy from Home Alone. Suddenly, the cheerful face audiences remembered carried a far more painful story behind it. Walking away from that environment gave him something he had rarely experienced before: freedom. But freedom didn't erase the past. The emotional scars remained, and while the legal battle finally came to an end, another challenge was already waiting just around the corner. Because once Hollywood's brightest child star stepped away from the spotlight, the public began writing a completely different story about him, one that was built on rumors, speculation, and headlines that would follow him for years. Just when it seemed Macaulay Culkin had finally escaped the pressures of Hollywood, a different kind of battle began, one that couldn't be fought on a movie set or inside a courtroom. After stepping away from acting, he hoped to live a quieter life, away from flashing cameras and endless expectations. But the world wasn't ready to let go of the child star it thought it knew. Instead, the headlines became darker. In 2004, Macaulay was arrested in Oklahoma on misdemeanor drug charges after police discovered marijuana and prescription medication during a traffic stop. Legally, the case was relatively minor, but the media treated it as something far more dramatic. Within hours, his mugshot appeared on television, newspaper covers, and entertainment websites across the world. Almost overnight, the public narrative changed. The lovable kid from Home Alone was suddenly portrayed as another tragic child star spiraling out of control. Over the following years, gossip magazines pushed increasingly sensational stories. Anonymous sources claimed he was battling severe addiction. Tabloids published alarming reports suggesting he was spending enormous amounts on drugs every month. Then came photographs showing him looking noticeably thinner, fueling even more speculation. The rumors spread faster than facts ever could. Many people accepted those headlines without question, convinced they were witnessing the final chapter of a once promising career. But there was one major problem. Much of the story simply wasn't true. Years later, Macaulay addressed those rumors himself, explaining that while he had experimented with drugs, the media had exaggerated his situation into something almost unrecognizable. According to him, the public had created a fictional version of his life, one that was far more dramatic than reality. Unfortunately, by the time the truth emerged, millions had already believed the lie. And while he struggled to reclaim his own identity, another unexpected friendship would place him at the center of one of the most controversial celebrity stories in modern history. But if the rumors about Macaulay Culkin weren't enough, another chapter of his life would keep pulling him back into headlines, no matter how hard he tried to move forward. It all began in the early 1990s, when Macaulay became close friends with Michael Jackson. At first, the friendship seemed understandable. One was the world's biggest child star. The other had spent his own childhood trapped inside the entertainment industry. Both knew what it felt like to grow up under relentless public attention. To many, they found comfort in someone who truly understood their unusual lives. But as years passed, public opinion changed. Jackson's legal troubles brought intense scrutiny to everyone connected to him. Suddenly, Macaulay's name was dragged into conversations he had never asked to be part of. Television shows, newspapers, and tabloids repeatedly questioned the nature of their friendship, often implying far more than the available facts supported. The speculation reached its peak during Michael Jackson's 2005 criminal trial. When Macaulay took the witness stand, millions watched closely, expecting shocking revelations. Instead, his testimony was remarkably clear. He firmly denied that Jackson had ever behaved inappropriately toward him and rejected the allegations made against his longtime friend. For Macaulay, it should have been the end of the story. Instead, it became another label he couldn't escape. Even years after the trial had ended, interviews about his own career often drifted back to the same questions. No matter what project he worked on or how much his life had changed, people continued asking about the past instead of his future. It was another reminder that fame has a strange way of freezing people in time. Yet while the public remained obsessed with old headlines, Macaulay was quietly rebuilding his life away from Hollywood. And in the most unexpected way imaginable, he was about to discover something he had spent decades searching for: not another blockbuster movie, but something far more valuable, a family of his own. Just when many people believed Macaulay Culkin's best years were behind him, life quietly began writing a completely different ending, one no one could have predicted. For decades, he had been defined by loss. A difficult childhood, Broken family relationships. Endless public scrutiny. Every chapter of his life seemed to begin with success and end with another painful setback. But away from the cameras, something was finally changing. In 2017, while filming Changeland in Thailand, Macaulay met actress Brenda Song. Unlike the relationships that tabloids had endlessly analyzed in the past, this one grew quietly, far from Hollywood's constant noise. There were no dramatic headlines, no carefully staged photo opportunities, and no attempts to turn their private lives into public entertainment. For perhaps the first time, Macaulay wasn't trying to survive fame. He was simply living. Friends close to the couple noticed a remarkable difference. The once guarded actor appeared more relaxed, more confident, and genuinely happier than he had been in years. The sharp humor that fans remembered from interviews returned, but now it seemed to come from a place of peace rather than self-defense. Then came the moment that changed everything. In April 2021, the couple welcomed their first son, naming him Dakota in honor of Macaulay's late sister, whose tragic death had haunted the family for years. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a deeply personal promise that her memory would continue through a new generation. A second son followed, completing the family he had once believed might never exist. For someone who had spent much of his childhood feeling controlled by adults, becoming a father transformed his entire outlook. Macaulay often spoke about wanting to give his children something he never truly experienced himself, a home built on love, patience, and emotional safety. At last, it seemed the painful chapters were finally behind him. But fate had one more heartbreak waiting, and this one would reopen wounds he thought had finally healed. But just when it seemed Macaulay Culkin had finally found the peace he'd spent a lifetime searching for, one phone call brought his past crashing back into the present. For most people, the loss of a friend is heartbreaking. For Macaulay, this loss felt like losing one of the few adults who had ever made him feel truly safe. During the filming of Home Alone, while the cameras captured Kevin McAllister's adventures, another story was unfolding behind the scenes. Surrounded by enormous expectations and the pressures that came with becoming Hollywood's biggest child star, Macaulay found comfort in someone who treated him not as a celebrity, but simply as a child. That person was Catherine O'Hara. To audiences, she played his mother on screen. But according to Macaulay, her kindness extended far beyond the script. Between takes, she checked on him, made sure he was comfortable, and created a sense of normalcy during a period when very little in his life felt normal. Years later, when they reunited at his Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony, their bond hadn't faded. Their smiles carried the warmth of two people connected by memories that only they truly understood. Fans saw a touching reunion. Macaulay saw someone who had quietly helped him survive one of the most overwhelming chapters of his life. Then came the heartbreaking news. Her passing didn't just mark the loss of a beloved actress. It closed the door on a piece of Macaulay's childhood that had remained untouched by pain. His emotional tribute wasn't filled with dramatic speeches or carefully chosen words. It was simple, honest, and deeply personal. In just a few lines, he revealed a regret many people know all too well, the belief that there would always be more time. But sometimes, life doesn't give us another chance. And for Macaulay, that realization became one of the heaviest moments of his entire journey, leading him to reflect on everything he had survived and everything he still carried inside. In the end, perhaps the biggest misunderstanding about Macaulay Culkin was never about his career, it was about the man himself. For years, the world tried to fit his life into a simple narrative. Some remembered him only as the mischievous boy who defended his house from burglars. Others saw him as another child star who had supposedly lost everything. But neither version told the complete story. The truth was far more complicated. Behind the laughter of Home Alone was a child carrying responsibilities that should never belong to someone so young. Behind the tabloid headlines was a man fighting to reclaim his identity after years of being defined by other people's expectations. And behind the public image was someone who never stopped searching for something many people take for granted, a place where he could simply feel safe. That search eventually led him to the family he built with Brenda Song and their children. It taught him that success isn't measured by box office numbers or magazine covers. It's measured by the peace you find when the cameras stop rolling. Even after decades in the spotlight, Macaulay has never claimed his life was perfect. Instead, he has shown something far more meaningful, the courage to keep moving forward despite everything that tried to pull him back. His journey reminds us that healing doesn't erase the past. It simply allows us to carry it differently. Perhaps that's why the recent loss affected him so deeply. It wasn't only the passing of someone he admired. It was the loss of one of the few people connected to a childhood memory that still felt warm amid so much pain. As one chapter quietly came to an end, another continues through the family he now cherishes, proving that even after unimaginable hardship, hope can still find its way back. If this story touched you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy deeply researched stories about Hollywood's biggest stars, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary.